everybody, it's Emily. Welcome to another Grass River micro class. So today I'm hanging out on our rail trail and I wanted to talk about two of the more common invasive species, invasive plants that occur in upland habitats like what we're seeing on the rail trail. And by upland I just mean away from water, drier sites. So those two species I wanted to talk about are spotted knapweed and autumn olive. We're going to learn how to identify them today and how they cause harm. Because before we go any further, we should define an invasive species. So an invasive species, there are kind of two parts to the definition. First part is that it's non-native, meaning that the species does not originate from this place. It is not native, its native original range did not include this place. So non-native, but also it has to cause harm or be likely to cause harm to our economy, our environment, or human health. Okay, so here's our first species. This is autumn olive. And it's a shrub, and you can see it can get pretty tall. I mean, definitely over head height. Sometimes it can appear like a small tree. This is a relatively small specimen. And it's got these leaves that are kind of silvery gray above, but then the real telltale sign is there's silvery scales underneath here. They're really reflective and actually quite pretty. And then this time of year, larger specimens will have huge amounts of red, kind of like smaller than olives, but olive-shaped berries. And they're kind of silvery red, like red with silver scales. And then oftentimes on the actual stems of the autumn olive, you get these pretty impressive thorns. Like here's one down here, and they're very sharp. So often we see autumn olive growing in the environment where it's growing right now, kind of on the edge between a forest and a much more open area. It can also grow just anywhere there's enough sun, and it loves disturbed soils. And so it is native to Asia, but it was actually introduced on purpose to the United States back in the 1830s as an ornamental, because its foliage, the silvery scales, and the berries and the cream-colored flowers are actually quite pretty. It was also introduced for wildlife food because birds feed voraciously on the prolific crop of berries. I mean, we're talking, like 200,000 plus berries per plant. So it was introduced on purpose for that reason, but then the Soil Conservation Service actually started using it to control erosion along ridge lines and roads and bridges and that sort of thing before they really realized that it was a problem. So that's how it really spread. But today there are two main problems with the ecosystem that are caused by autumn olive. The first point of harm is that it really displaces and outcompetes native vegetation. And that's because it grows so fast and it leaves out early in the spring, so it shades out native vegetation. And it is spread so easily and has such a prolific crop of seeds that birds eat and then carry the seeds elsewhere. But also because it's a nitrogen fixer. And we normally think of that as a good thing. Things like legumes in your garden restore the nitrogen to the soil. Alders do that in wetlands. But for autumn olive, it, like all nitrogen fixers, is able to take nitrogen out of the atmosphere, and it hosts bacteria on root nodules that transform that nitrogen into a different form where it's then bioavailable for plants to uptake through their roots. But the problem with that is that the native vegetation is adapted to low nitrogen levels. So when the autumn olive comes in, it basically paves the way for more autumn olive because it's changing the soil chemistry, and then the native vegetation doesn't have the leg up that they normally have. Like, I can live in low nitrogen soils, and then more autumn olive is able to come in. All right, and here's our second common upland invasive species here in northern Michigan. This guy is spotted knapweed, and it's really easy to identify. It usually takes over old fields, roadsides, disturbed places. It's got this sort of grayish green foliage that has lance-like lobes on it, and then these flowers that look sort of thistly, but like this pink purple color, and they mostly bloom from July through September, but we've got a few still hanging on here. And then the old flower heads are very distinctive too, sort of this dried up thistle shape, and this is where the spotted name comes from. These sort of spots here, dark tips to the thistle bracts there. And the plant starts out as a basal rosette in the beginning, the first year. So let's see if we can find an example of that. Like, this is a basal rosette, just like leaves coming out in a circle from the ground, and then it shoots up the flower head in subsequent years. So spotted knapweed originates from Eurasia, and it got to the United States accidentally, as opposed to autumn olive, which was introduced here on purpose. It spread first to British Columbia from Eurasia in contaminated alfalfa and clover seeds, and then in the late 1800s, and then was subsequently spread throughout the United States. In also alfalfa and possibly clover seeds before it was really recognized as a problem. But it is a problem both for our ecosystem and also for our economy. For our ecosystem, because it outcompetes native species, it actually exudes a chemical that acts like a poison and inhibits the growth and germination of other species of plants around it. It's a process called allelopathy that actually many plants all over the globe exhibit. And so then it creates these big monocultures in old fields where very few natives exist, and it's mostly just spotted knapweed. And that's a problem for the ecosystem, at least, because knapweed, it just has one long taproot, and it doesn't have a big network of sort of like sod forming or clump forming roots that helps to hold the soil in place. So erosion is often more severe, erosion of topsoil in fields that are predominantly spotted knapweed. And so that topsoil often runs into nearby streams and waterways, increases stream sedimentation, and that's a whole nother host of problems. But not only does it cause harm to the environment, it also causes harm to our economy, because knapweed will take over old fields. It often takes over rangelands, and that's a problem because it is not as high quality of a forage for livestock as our native grasses and herbs are. And livestock will actually preferentially not eat the knapweed, so not only is the forage quality decreased, but also the quantity. And so that's a real problem, that it degrades important rangelands in the state and all over the country. So Grass River Natural Area is a relatively pristine place, and the fact that we have invasive species here just goes to show you how good those plants are at spreading their seeds and infiltrating and invading an ecosystem. We are always monitoring for invasive species and mapping them, but it's definitely an ongoing effort. So if you have invasive species on your own property, either one of these two, spotted knapweed or autumn olive, or something else, there are great resources out there that you can tap into. One is the Midwest Invasive Species Information Network. They have fact sheets on each species, maps you can look at. You can even upload and report a sighting on your own if you're part of their network. And then also, specific to the state of Michigan, our invasive species program is jointly managed by Eagle, the DNR, and MDARD, and they've got lots of great resources online too. All right, so thanks for joining me for this Grass River micro class. Enjoy the week, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.